This is the Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski.
Featuring defense attorney, Hidden Killers daily contributor, and host of the Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Motta.
Alex Murdaugh, love him or hate him, think he's innocent or guilty, he still deserves a fair trial. And maybe he did get a fair trial. That's one of the questions that's being asked right now. Attorneys for Alex Murdaugh now requesting that the South Carolina Supreme Court take a look at the accusations against Becky Hill and possibly look at doing a retrial. And they're also asking for Judge Colleton Newman to be removed from the Alex Murdaugh cases. Here to discuss that, Bob Motta, defense attorney, host of the Defense Diaries podcast. I obviously don't think there's anybody that can truly say they are a fan of Alex Murdaugh. But at the same point, we're fans of justice. We're fans of playing by the rules and doing what is entitled and doing what you're supposed to be doing in your roles. Let's start by talking about Judge Colleton Newman before we get into the accusations of jury tampering. Obviously, after this case wrapped up, he made many appearances on TV. He expressed his disdain for Alex Murdaugh, as many of us have. But again, he's the judge, very much showing, he thinks Alex Murdaugh is not that nice of a person, and that's putting it nicely. But he's still presiding. He's still set to preside over the Gloria Satterfield trial and any other hearings and trials that are to pertain with Alex Murdaugh. Is this an impartial judge at this point? Is this something that he should have been doing, going out and making these comments on the Today Show and wherever else he went?
Well, I mean,
where does that put him?
Puts him in a spot. It's less that, judges are prone to do that occasionally, especially in a case like that where it's so high profile. But I think the bigger issue for Judge Newman, who I really respect as a judge, he's a heck of a judge. I thought he handled that trial beautifully, had control over it the whole time. Because cases like that can turn into circuses.
Sure.
Like we just talked about one that's a circus, so that shows you how important the role of the judge is to maintain decorum, not just during the trial, but leading up to trial, so him kind of going out and making public statements, even, in his sentencing, he made it very clear that, he believed that the jury made the right decision and that the evidence pointed strongly to his guilt. So, he's clearly laid out the fact that he thinks that Murdaugh did this. I don't think that means that he couldn't be impartial in terms of hearing the matter. My personal opinion is that he should recuse himself, but not for that. I think that he needs to recuse himself. And in that case, actually, they've also filed a writ of mandamus over there, too, seeking to have him removed because he's potentially a witness.
Yeah. And
he's a witness to what went on with Becky Hill, So I think that's ultimately what is going to be the decision on whether or not to pull him from the case, not so much the impartiality or the bias, because bias is really hard to prove, and it's always going to be the default position to assume that the judge can remain objective and impartial because that's his job. No matter what he may have said publicly or on the record.
And when we're talking about him being a possible witness, if there is that hearing that explores what exactly went on with these allegations of possible jury tampering with Becky Hill, that does make a lot of sense. Let's go down that road for a moment, though, in the relationship that is there between a judge and his clerk of courts. Let's say that Becky Hill did do these things. And obviously, innocent till proven guilty in any of this. These are just the allegations. But let's say that this actually did take place. What are the odds that Judge Colleton Newman knew about any of these things going on? Or was, if this did happen, just kind of the work of someone who's kind of, for lack of a better term, a chatty Cathy that just, going to say things here and there. And it turned out there's a hell of a lot of consequences for it.
Yeah, I think the odds that he knew, was aware of it, and let it go unchecked are slim and none. I don't think that he was privy to what was going on in that sense. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's what he'd be testifying to. I think he'd have to be testifying to observations that he may have made with respect to her, contact with the jury and how often it was happening and, just what he observed, like as an observer, not necessarily throwing him under the bus and saying, okay, well, we think you were allowing this to happen on your watch. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I think that he may have relevant information that would require him to become a witness in the matter. So from that perspective, I think the safe bet, and frankly, if I was him, I wouldn't adamantly be trying to stay on it. I'd say, well, yeah, if I've got to be a judge, then fine, let somebody else conduct the hearing, because again, at the end of the day, like you said, got to have a fair trial, and if somehow Becky Hill was able to sway this jury, which is yet to be determined, that's why we got to have the hearing, and then it'll be determined. And if they were, and the court finds that happened, then Alex Murdaugh's going to get a new trial, and we'll have to sit through that whole thing again.
I was very surprised by some of the responses this week to the prosecution coming out and denying all of it, which is to be expected. I wasn't going to expect Becky Hill to raise her hand and be like, yep, I did it. It's exactly what we were expecting to hear. I was surprised by many people going, well, is that it then? Is it over and done because she said she didn't do it? Of course not. There's two sides to this story. And they're going to paint each side to be as strong as they possibly can. But when you look at some of the statements from the prosecution, which I do think did a good job, I think Judge Clifton Newman's a great judge. I think Creighton Waters was a good attorney. But I do have some issue where some of the bolder statements that have been made saying, everyone we've talked to said that this did not happen. You didn't talk to everyone. You haven't talked to all of the jurors. There's still, I believe, 3 and 2 and an alternate that have declined to talk or have already made their statement. The attorneys for Alex Murdaugh, the fact that they even filed this, they wouldn't just do that for the hell of it, or if they were making something up. There has to be something there. There are serious consequences if they were to just pull this out of their butt and say, yeah. So there's got to be something to it. But I guess what is that?
Exactly. And that's why you have the hearing. That's what due process is all about. It's exactly what didn't happen in the Allen case is what you need to see happen here. There's got to be a full hearing. Could be exactly what you said. She's just a chatty Cathy. She just made some off-color remarks in terms of, I wouldn't trust anything that guy says on the stand. But it's like, did that end up changing what their verdict was going to be, which will ultimately be the question? Probably not. They're sitting there watching it, but maybe.
But how do you prove that? That's the question of how do you prove that did it? Because you can't.
And I think that we talked about that aspect of it a while back when we kind of first caught wind of this. But you would have to be able to transport back in time, like Back to the Future style, to go back into your mind, like at the moment that it happened. And prior to see whether or not it actually affected your judgment on the case. You know what I'm saying? It's like trying to figure out now, when they've already declared him guilty, they all went back and they briefly deliberated and came back and found him guilty, which, I think we all expected it.
Yeah.
They had that thing where, the crimes that he committed against his own clients, just people that were destitute and with catastrophic injuries, and he's stealing all their money. If somebody's on the fence, they're going to lean guilty just by way of hearing all that, because they're like, all right, well, this guy's a scumbag either way. And, even though I don't know if they completely and totally convinced me that he did it, it's close enough. And because he did all that other stuff, I'm just telling you how real human beings and jurors think, know. So, he's going down. But yeah, like you said, it's like incredibly hard to prove. And I'm talking about even from the juror's perspective, even if you're to put them on the stand and in the courts to inquire, well, did what she say to you affect your opinion in the case? And how do you honestly answer it?
And
you can't really know. She's definitely a person of authority.
Yeah.
And she's walking back there. She's the only one talking. They don't know. They have no idea if she's allowed to be talking to him about the case.
Oh.
Even though that Newman says it every time they leave the courthouse, every night, and every morning when they come in, did you talk to anybody about the case? Did anybody talk to you about the case? Maybe they thought she didn't count because she was the go-between between the court and the jury.
So
she really was.
If this goes to the evidentiary hearing and most of the jurors, except for 1 or 2, say she never said any of this, at least not to me. But you have one or two that raise their hand and say, yeah, she did. She did to me. Is that enough right there to say you get a new trial? Just, I mean, we don't know if it affected your decision or not, but the fact that we're even questioning it, should that then lead to a new trial for Alex Murdaugh?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think so, but it might. I mean, if they think it's just there's so much at play with that decision.
Yeah.
And it's a highly political decision because it's not just as simple as, we have to go do retry the case. It costs a fortune to try a case like that.
Yeah.
A fortune. I mean, there's just a lot at play. And, if even if the jurors can't answer the question definitively, the court within their discretion can say, well, we listened to what they said. And, we asked some probing questions, or some probing questions were asked, and we feel pretty confident that they would have arrived at the same verdict, notwithstanding Miss Hill saying any of those things to them. Then they're going to deny it. I mean, if they feel like, because you're going to have the issue with the egg lady, the egg lady where Newman, basically he vordired her, in open court, asking her about certain things, asking her specifically on the record alone, just interviewing her alone, whether or not, anybody had spoken to her. And she said no. And then comes this affidavit where she's saying, yeah, the clerk spoke to me and was talking about the case all the time, so it'll be interesting, man. I tend to think it'll get denied, but I could be wrong. It depends on what comes out at the hearing.
Want to listen ad-free? Want advanced access to all of our interviews before anyone else?
Become a True Crime Today Premium Plus subscriber on Apple Podcasts.
You get every episode commercial-free,
so you can binge on true crime
until you can binge no more.
Search True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts now, or go to our podcast page and sign up now.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast next.